So, all right, let's see what this is.
If you've ever seen the movie, my mouth is gonna be so full of milk.
Oh, he's in a milk tub.
If you've ever seen the movie Minority Report or read the book Like Some Kind of Dork, you're probably familiar with the concept of pre-crime.
Pre-crime.
Pre-crime. Pre-crime.
Minority Report.
Minority Report. Minority Report. Minority Report.
The Attorney General.
What the hell is happening?
I have no idea!
Basically, 3 psychic teenagers are given a ton of drugs and they live in a bath of lukewarm milk 24/7, which, you know, actually feels incredible. While tripping absolute balls, they vividly hallucinate crimes that will happen in the future, allowing the police to go arrest the perpetrators before the crimes have actually happened. And it's kind of a dumb premise, but the movie's awesome, early 2000s classic, and it
The
features
banger.
some of the best run acting Tom Cruise has ever done. Well, I wouldn't be in a bath.
Also, the one thing about Climate Town is like the audio here is just so funny.
Full of half milk, half water. The Supreme Court didn't just pull a little Minority Report of their own in the case of West Virginia versus the Environmental Protection Agency.
It is.
Basically, they ruled 6-3 that the Obama-era Clean Power Plan, which was aimed at reducing emissions from electricity generation, was hereby null and void. Except, here's the thing. The Obama-era Clean Power Plan was never actually enacted. Oh, it was a fun plan when the Obama administration released the final draft in 2015.
With this clean power plan, by 2030, carbon pollution from our power plants will be 32% lower than it was a decade ago.
But it was immediately tied up in the courts, and then Trump came in and said no to that, and then Biden came in and they decided they were going to make a whole new plan, which means at no point, past or present, was the Clean Power Plan an actual...
He didn't even use real milk. He used oat milk. I respect it. Listen, I respect this. I don't even care what he's saying right now. I mean, he's probably spitting. But all I could see was the Oatly. This is lib shit. But it is Climate Town, so I'm not surprised that he's kind of again. He's probably like a vegan or some shit.
Policy. But, of course, that didn't stop the newly radicalized Supreme Court from demanding to hear this case so that they could pre-regulate that it would be a crime if it ever was a thing in the future. Well, unfortunately, the Supreme Court didn't just goof up and make some kind of meaningless decision. They almost certainly decided to hear this case because the new conservative supermajority wanted to make a few changes around here.
Oh wait, I just realized my audio is
They wanted
messed
to
up.
set
Wait.
precedent that federal administrations don't really have the power to do anything substantial without a signed permission slip from their parents, aka Congress, in the form of a hyper-specific law. And considering it just took Congress 2 years to get a single piece of watered-down climate legislation past a 50-vote majority, and most of these hyper-specific laws would require 60 votes to pass, it does not take some kind of psychic milk boy to tell that this is going to be a very negative decision for federal-level climate policy. But despite this being just a real kick-in-the-balls kind of decision, an alternate path to climate action that some kind of, I don't know, concerned citizen watching this video can genuinely help with. Hi, I'm Raleigh Williams, a guy with a climate science and policy degree and a lot of new opinions about milk.
By the way,
and this is a video about
my political science of the climate class was the most fun class I ever took. Well, second maybe most fun class I ever took. Very good class.
how the Supreme Court
And he has a
just
degree in
declared
that.
war on the environment. Welcome to Climate Town. This story starts all the way back when America first realized that all these new health problems people were having might just have something to do with the fact that we were treating the environment like it was some kind of porta potty at a music festival. Between the jambalaya of toxic...
Fun. I haven't taken any of this class, but I can't imagine the topics are anything but doom. They're not doom. Most of the... When you take like... When I took a... my climate politics of the environment class is actually not doomer. A few of it's a little bit doomer, right? But you just learn about the policy of things, but you learn about how, like, most of the class was talked about, like, how these got enacted. Does that mean sense? Like, you're talking about, like, the interworkings of, like, what did these congressmen have to do to convince the other congressmen, congresswomen, how to enact this policy? what was the geopolitical like structure like? You know, what allowed this? What like facilitated this? For example, the damming of the Salmon River in Idaho, right? There's no more salmon in the Salmon River. Fun fact. It's still called the Salmon River, but there's no more salmon. But that dam produces a lot of power, like, and arguably is better for the environment than a coal plant, right? Because the salmon found another river. There's no evidence to support like a massive die-off. They just moved into a different river. They started spawning up a different one. The problem arises when you dam like the only river, right? Like the Colorado, or you dam like the Columbia. That's where problems start occurring. And the thing is that happens with climate policy, at least what you study is like where the main field of study is like where's government making the concessions, right? Like, do they recognize that like there's issues? Are they willing to not give a shit, right? And sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't, right? Yeah, sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not. And that's the job of climate scientists to discover. And most of the time, the climate scientists aren't listened to. Government doesn't listen to climate scientists. They literally don't give a shit. They're like, can we do it? They're like, I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing. And they're like, yeah, okay, let's fucking do it. Okay.
Air pollution from heavy industry, and an infestation of cars that vented exhaust like they were signaling the election of the new pope, America's air quality was not doing great. Unless we're talking like how the Great Depression was great, in which case it was doing great. Because over the course of just 1 month in 1948, 70 people in Denora, Pennsylvania died from breathing in industrial smog. The Cuyahoga River was so polluted that it caught fire at least 13 times. Air pollution from cars and industry was so bad in LA that people thought the city was under a gas attack from Japan. People were freaking out.
Jesus.
But this is a time in American history when the federal government did not have the power to regulate air quality. So Congress launched a big bipartisan investigation, which quickly turned into the Air Pollution Control Act of 1955, which turned into the Clean Air Act of 1963, which officially, for the first time, gave the federal government authority to protect the country against industries, groups, and individuals polluting the air. It was such a success that
the Conservatives took power in Ontario in 2017. They tried to cite a study of a type of bat that would go extinct if windmills were kept up in the along the 115 highway. They ultimately lost the case, but they tried anything to get those taken down. Yep. Yeah, that's another thing. By the way, like windmills don't kill that many birds. Like birds aren't fucking, and bats, they aren't that fucking stupid. Like dog, trees blow in the wind. They know how to dodge a tree. I think they can dodge a windmill most of the time. Okay? We're not like eliminating all their environment. Windmills don't attack unless threatened.
Congress expanded the policy in 1967 with the Air Quality Act, and then in 1970, notorious bare-ass hippie liberal Richard Nixon from the Republican Party officially created the Environmental Protection Agency. And this wasn't just like a first for America. This is the first federal agency of its kind in the world, and it actually led to a bunch of other countries copying us, like a bunch of copiers. Congress then passed a second Clean Air Act at the end of 1970 with overwhelming bipartisan support. Well, overwhelming is kind of vague, so let's talk about exactly how overwhelming this was. 73-0 in the Senate and 374-1 in the House. That one no vote? Glenn Clarence Cunningham of Nebraska, who went on to have
That was a good edit.
illustrious career of immediately losing his next election and getting dunced right out of Congress because people didn't like it when you voted against the environment. Once it was passed, the Clean Air Act of 1970 authorized the development of comprehensive federal...
Bro, I didn't realize Nixon wore such a big suit and looks like a child in like a blazer. Anyone else see that?
Once it was passed,
Nixon does kind of look like a child in a blazer.
the Clean Air Act of 1970 authorized
Yes, like
the development of comprehensive federal and state regulations to limit emissions from both stationary sources like industry and electricity generation, and mobile sources like cars. The Clean Air Act of 1970 outlined a bunch of detailed statutes, but more importantly, it also gave some goals and objectives to achieve through regulations that the EPA would develop. Which makes
Best thing
sense.
Nixon did.
Congress sets the goals, and the scientists and experts at the EPA determine how to hit those goals. But
Yeah,
I'm
probably.
sure the system didn't work that well. I
JFK
mean,
was
the
a
EPA and the Clean Air Act
dreamboat.
were basically only successful at banning DDT pesticides that were about to make the bald eagle extinct, discovering and preventing acid rain, removing lead from gasoline, removing lead from paint, removing lead from children's toys, doubling the number of swimmable and fishable lakes and rivers, enacting indoor smoking bans, regulating the use and disposal of cancer-causing and otherwise toxic chemicals, establishing and improving emission standards for cars and trucks, creating clean drinking water standards, and punishing corporations who dumped or poisoned that drinking water, protection for minority and low-income citizens, establishing pollution control technology for power plants, reducing U.S. air pollution by 70%, by air pollution by 70%, the economy is... The Clean Air Act has saved millions of American lives and saved the government trillions of dollars in healthcare costs, economic
Okay, I always thought Climate Town's editing wasn't as good, but this was good. I only have one gripe, and can you guess what it is, chat? I've never watched a full Climate Town video. Can you guess what my gripe is, chat? Can anybody guess what my one problem is? No, not even audio in the bathroom. Just his audio in general. It's just kind of shite. Okay? It's just shit. Okay? Man, you have 300,000 subs. You got enough money to buy a shotgun mic, bro. Here. Where's mine? Okay. And then put it under your shit and point it right at your mouth and it'd be fine. Okay? Also, lack of bisexual lighting. Stop being an audiophile. I'm not an audiophile. I just think about it, okay? Wouldn't you want the perfect, if you're going to make something that's your art, don't you think, like, this should be really good, right? It's not bad. By the way, this is better than 90% of people. I just am nitpicky because I think, like, I'm just nitpicky because I think if you have, like, a big following like this, it's very easy to just dial it in. You know what I mean? It could be so much worse, Keith. You're right. He's better than 95% of people on YouTube, right? And the thing is, I think your audio, because, yeah, this is exactly, I'm focused on what he's saying. And, like, the room noise is so distracting to me. Like, you guys can hear it. Listen.
lives and save the government trillions of dollars in healthcare costs, economic shocks, and avoided disease.
It sounds like I'm watching a college lecture. I feel like I'm watching my professor on Zoom. Okay, maybe not that bad, but you know what I mean? Instead, he could just have, like, I mean, he could even have this mic just barely out of frame. I'm just nitpicky because I think that, especially talking head videos, that's what this is called, you just got to dial it in, right? You can hear what I'm saying, Blamo. It's literally just layered in his voice. It sounds like I don't know how to describe it. Doubled, right? I see what you're saying, but it isn't natural for me to notice. You notice it because you would notice the difference, right? You would 100%, if he was talking without the room mic, I'm telling you, you would notice the difference. You would 100%, if he had a good microphone, you'd be like, ah, shit, this sounds really good. Right? You'd be like, what changed? This sounds awesome. Wait, I'll show you. I got an, look. Wait. I'll demonstrate. Wait. I can demonstrate. Let's see. So there's a giant difference if I talk like this, right? You can hear my room noise. You can probably hear my AC, right? You guys can hear everything. And that's what his mic sounds like to me, okay? It sounds like I can hear everything. I can hear him talking. I can hear everything. But if he just, watch, if he just turned the mic put it just barely out of frame, okay? Dial in this gain a little bit, talk directly at the microphone. All of a sudden, it gets way better, like instantly. And then you could just dial it in even more, and then it sounds real fucking good. And if you want to sound really good, you get it as close as you can and just maintain it out of frame. Okay? Sorry, I am an audiophile, but you know why? Because I feel like that's like the easiest thing. Well, okay, that's bias. Obviously, I'm extremely biased. But that's the easiest thing to set up is audio. Right? That is the easiest thing to set up, is like to just spend time doing on it. Listen, Climate Town's awesome though. I'm just being literally the most nitpicky person.
Disasters.
Oh yeah, by the way, this video sounds great. If you listen on speakers or like a phone or something, his audio is fine. You guys probably can't even tell what I'm talking about. It's definitely a headphones thing.
Is widely considered the most powerful century in the United States. Even dipshits trying to attack the EPA end up dunking on themselves. Remember when they spent years telling us to panic over the hole in the ozone layer and then suddenly just stopped talking about it? Nobody ever
Matt
mentioned
Walsh,
the ozone
what
layer
a fucking loser.
again? Oh, cool. And just, do you know why you never hear about the hole in the ozone layer anymore?
Because they fixed it.
It's because they fucking fixed it! It's because the EPA and the world's governments fixed it! Scientists discovered it, the countries of the world signed the Montreal Protocol.
The Montreal Protocol, unprecedented display of international cooperation to protect the world's environment.
And then they wrote and enforced laws to fix the hole in the ozone layer. My God, Google it! Just Google it one time. Why are you, it's insane. Whatever. If you like it when...
Bro, it's Matt Walsh. How can you think Matt Walsh put more than 1 second of thought into anything ever said? He didn't, okay?
the air you breathe every day doesn't kill you. You have the overwhelmingly successful EPA to thank and the Clean Air Act of 1970 to flirt with. And they're right over there. Go over there, say something. What's the worst that's gonna happen? Come on, go for it. And it kind of goes without saying, but the reason why individual states had so much trouble regulating air pollution is because the pollution is in the air, and air moves across state lines. I mean, frankly, I'm not even convinced that air pollution knows what state lines are. You see, if you regulate pollution in one state but not another, the polluter can just move to the pollution-friendly state, pollute, and because air can move, both states now have pollution. This is the kind of problem that is best dealt with on a federal level. Or to put it in Minority Report terms,
falls under federal jurisdiction.
Federal jurisdiction. Thank you very much, Colin Farrell, looking very svelte in this. This is the O2 Colin Farrell. So he's, you know, it's not hip to be jacked yet. And I mean, it's all about Hemsworths now, obviously, but it used to be cool to be, you know, kind of a little beanpole. Now, obviously, this is not a perfect system. The head of the EPA is appointed by the president, and sometimes the president appoints this kind of guy. Now, this kind of guy is Scott Pruitt, a man who is literally trying to destroy the EPA.
Well, I think when you look at the challenges out of Washington right now, it's bigger than healthcare. It's the EPA.
EPA issues rules that we find oppressive, we find intrusive, we don't like them.
Right before he was appointed head of the EPA,
the degree of human activity's impact on the climate is subject to more debate on whether the climate is changing or whether human activity contributes to it.
Before he resigned in disgrace less than 2 years later. I mean, the man installed a $43,000 soundproof booth in his office before he moved in. Not exactly inspiring a lot of confidence, but for the most part, EPA administrators who haven't taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from fossil fuel companies tend to be a little more reasonable. And yes, the EPA does force businesses to jump through a few more hoops, but those hoops are often answering questions like, hey, where are you putting your toxic waste? And are you bulldozing an endangered animal's habitat so you can build the Crypto.com presents the Doritos Locos Taco from Taco Bell Arena? And I swear we are almost there. My God, this is a context-heavy episode. Okay, before Scott Pruitt was EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, and before he was placed under 14 separate federal investigations for ethics violations.
Oh. Pruitt was nominated to lead the EPA by Donald Trump? Oh, shocker. That's crazy. Weird. It's kind of weird.
He was Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt. And when Obama used the Clean Air Act, and specifically Section 111D, to pitch the Clean Power Plan in 2015, Scott Pruitt and a bunch of other attorneys general filed a lawsuit against it with a group called RAGA, or the Republican Attorneys General Association. And then Trump won, and obviously he didn't implement the Clean Power Plan. And then Biden won, and he didn't implement the Clean Power Plan either. Oh, and the Clean Power Plan that's got everyone so up their own ass, not even that ambitious of a plan. I mean, credit where credit is due. The EPA using Section 111.
His audio's growing on me, chat. You know why? I think it's more personal. I lied. I like it. Okay, you know what it reminds me of? Some dude just spitting in his room. I respect it. It grew on me. Audio stunlock is over. It grew on me. I like it.
11D of the
It's a stylistic choice. I respect it.
Clean Air Act was an effective scare tactic, so it's not as though the Clean Power Plan had zero influence. But ultimately, it was a 15-year emissions reduction plan that America basically accomplished in 4 years without the plan even going into effect. Okay, this is not some massive America reshaping plan. It was a limp-wristed, uninspired plan that I can't believe we're still talking about.
Listen, Sweaty, you can't say limp-wristed anymore. Okay, listen, hear me out. You're not allowed to say that, okay? Because that's homophobic, okay? You're not listen, time to start a thread. One of 37. Climate Town said limp-wristed. Problematic.
But I guess here we are.
Is it now? Yes, this is all happening right now.
And that, finally, is the context you need to know going into the absolute farce of a Supreme Court case that is West Virginia versus the EPA. Okay, so Scott Pruitt and the attorneys general might have challenged the Clean Power Plan back in 2015, but they've been trying to chip away at the EPA and the federal government's ability to regulate climate change for years, okay? Do you remember the Republican Attorneys General Association I talked about like 30 seconds ago? The group called RAGA, or the Republican Attorneys General Association. I said it right here. Well, RAGA was formed in the 90s by some Republican attorneys general who, and I shit you not, were mad that tobacco companies were being held accountable for giving people cancer and then lying about it. RAGA made it their beeswax to fund and elect Republican judges who would help protect business interests by removing power from the federal government and allowing states to decide what they regulate, which, as you may recall, was exactly what led to this.
Mysterious death. 20 die. 400 others are stricken with respiratory ailments.
RAGA is primarily funded by completely normal grassroots groups like the Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, the NRA, and the Judicial Crisis Network. And jointly, they selected and campaigned for each and every Trump appointee that swung the balance of the Supreme Court to a delightful Christian nationalist supermajority that might end up legalizing some kind of the purge. Oh, and I almost forgot, RAGA sent out this charming robocall on a certain January 5th.
The March to Save America is tomorrow. At 1 o'clock p.m., we will march to the Capitol building and call on Congress to stop the steal. We are hoping patriots like you will join us to continue the fight to protect the...
Wait, this is a environmental thing. Or I guess it was started by anti-environmentalist.
integrity of our elections.
Awesome. So if you're just joining us now, a bunch of radical right-wing Supreme Court justices whose campaigns were funded by RAGA decided to take a defunct case sponsored by RAGA and use it as an excuse.
Oh, the Republicans Attorney Generals Association. Sorry, that's what RAGA is. It's not the other thing. Yep.
Forward RAGA's anti-federal regulation agenda. But don't just jump in now. There's like 10
remember, chat, it wasn't a coup. It was also facilitated by Antifa. Also is fake. Also, you could subscribe to me with Twitch Prime.
10 minutes of context. What are you doing? So what is RAGA's legal argument for pre-regulation? Well, it's pretty thin, which is probably why the movie Minority Report doesn't spend a whole lot of time on their regulatory legal framework for pre-crime, and they spend more time on things like this. Basically, the Republican attorneys general argue that when Congress delegated broad authority to the EPA and wrote explicitly that the EPA should use the best system of emission reduction, they didn't specifically say how the EPA could regulate carbon emissions from electricity generation. They argue that this would be too broad of a power for the EPA because it's an agency overseen solely by the executive branch, and that generally any decision that would create major questions for American society needs to be put before Congress. If you hear the phrase major questions doctrine, that's what it means. If an administration wants to make a regulation with large implications, aka major questions, you gotta ask your parents. And in this case, your parents are Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, which I think makes you roughly 60 years old. And while there is some sense to the idea that major questions might need Congress to weigh in, Congress already voted to give the EPA that regulatory power multiple times. The Clean Air Act is Congress's way of delegating power, and it's effective because when a policy deals with some highly technical shit, Congress people cannot be expected to know a lot about it.
Well, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
So they make guidelines, and then they delegate the specifics to an agency full of technical experts who can make informed decisions. They are the EPA. They are an A that P's the E. Let them P the E. J-C, man, J-F-C. And not that precedent means one single bean to this newly radicalized Supreme Court, but there is literally a Supreme Court case from 1984 that sets the precedent to defer to a federal agency when Congress doesn't give explicit instructions. It's called Chevron deference, but don't bother memorizing it because it's...
Remember who Chevron put in jail? Fucking Donziger, right? If you guys don't know, Chevron, literally a private company, put Donziger on house arrest. Stephen Donziger for like years. Yeah, it was Chevron. Yeah. They won here. They won it is it's even in his Twitter bio. They won a $9.5 billion judgment against Chevron, and Chevron used the power of like civil, I don't remember what they did. Essentially they got him caught up in a court case against Chevron, a private matter, by the way. Okay? A private thing, civil court, not legal court. I mean, not criminal court, civil court, that got him on house arrest for like 4 years.
Is apparently not a thing anymore after the Supreme Court just voted to revoke the EPA's authority to regulate in just such a situation. But while this decision has no direct impact because the law it's referring to doesn't exist, it does set a really bad precedent. Now, I don't want to scaremonger here. This does not disband the EPA or even prevent them from regulating carbon emissions or tailpipe emissions or that kind of thing. But it absolutely does open the floodgates for a whole ton of nitpicky bullshit lawsuits that seek to further chip away at...
No, because it was enacted through the state, right? He doesn't have a case because his house arrest was enacted by the state, but perpetrated by Chevron. I don't know how it happened. It's some weird ass law that exists, but essentially he was caught in literally a civil suit, right? That was hung up in court, and he wasn't like allowed to leave or go anywhere, so he was stuck on house arrest. I have no fucking idea how he ended up on house arrest from a civil matter. He talked about it on Hassan's stream, but I can't remember. But it's fucking ridiculous.
At the EPA's authority and the authority of federal agencies in general. It is not hard to see how another RAGA-funded case might use this one as precedent to go after minimum fuel standards or delay the transition to electrification or throw yet another lifeline to the dying coal industry, you name it. All this and more coming up after the break. But first, they call it TikTok, but can it make you sterile? Apparently, Minority Report was also a TV show? I never saw it. Hurricanes, who sent them? And when?
The judge.
Was his face all f***ed up or did he paint weird? The news
yeah, maybe Suga.
Okay, so this is depressing, no two ways about it. But it turns out there is a small silver lining to this power grab in the name of states' rights. You see, when God closes a door, and then bolts that door shut, turns around, stabs you in the kidney, sets a fire in the basement, and then goes, "What fire? Stop stabbing yourself." He opens a window. Or she opens a window. Because if the levers of power go from the national level to the state level, well, that means states just got a whole lot more powerful. And you know who lives in states? You. Unless, of course, you don't live in the United States, in which case we are so sorry, and we are working on it. We really appreciate your support, and a lot of this local level action might actually apply to you too, so thank you for watching this video. We're sorry forever. Your state and local representatives just inherited a much more important role, and double bonus, they are way easier for you to influence than, say, the Supreme Court of the United States, or whichever senator we've decided gets to determine if we pass federal climate legislation or not. You could focus on your local Public Utilities Commission. Public Utilities Commissions regulate utilities that serve 72% of US electricity customers and can do things like ban gas lines in new buildings and help set clean energy targets. In some states, this is an elected position. In others, they're appointed by the governor, another elected position. And there's a little link in the bio to help get you started. You could also focus on getting your state to adopt stricter
This is something Climate Towns that I really like. He tells you the solutions, right? Like multiple solutions. That's awesome to me. A lot of YouTubers don't do that, especially political or like activist type. He gives you hopium. Yeah.
Wait a minute, but I thought air pollution didn't understand state lines. First of all, I don't sound like that. And second of all, yeah, I know, but sometimes state policies can kind of weasel their way into the federal level, like how California has stricter vehicle emission standards than the federal government, and rather than regulate cars on a state-by-state basis, several other states adopted the higher vehicle standards. And when a bunch of Republican attorneys general challenged the higher standards in court so that their corporate donors wouldn't have to do the
You can also talk about something in a way that won't get you banned or something, right? Bro, there's tons of leftist people who gives like another reason I like Second Thought. Second Thought gives a solution.
And make better cars. Social pressure from people like you made auto manufacturers voluntarily.
I've watched like the end of his videos before. I've never finished like a whole video. I've never watched a whole Climate Town video. The only other Climate Town video we watched was where he was standing in front of a gas. This one. Yeah, here you go. You can see the other one I watched, and it was 2 months ago. I've never seen any of his other videos. Wait, maybe I have. Wait. Yeah, no, I've never watched a different one. Yeah. But we skipped around to that one and went to the end where he gave solutions.
Really hit California's higher emission targets nationwide. So I
see his shit on Twitter too.
Just kidding. Cars can go straight to hell. It's just nice to know they're getting there using a little less gas. But by far the best new target for your cajoling is mayors, baby! Whoo, didn't see that one coming, did ya? There's all kinds of mayors in America. There's big city slickin' mayors like Eric Adams or Eric Garcetti. There's mayors in charge of their itty bitty city committee, and there's all sizes of mayors in between, and mayors have a wild amount of power when it comes to cutting emissions. A slight side note here, 3 of America's 10 largest cities are currently being mayored by dudes named Eric. Way to go, Erics. Really putting the Eric back in America. Now, the West Virginia versus EPA case dealt with power plant emissions, which is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in America. But the first largest source of emissions are still cars and trucks.
Also, fun fact, your local government, depending on where you live, is more likely to have a DSA member. Because over the last 2 years, the DSA has seen more representation than ever before. Ever. We have more DSA members in positions of power than ever before in America right now. Ever. More socialist or leftist ideas in local politics than ever.
Did you know that 70% of driving occurs in...
I live in Alabama, so it's more likely a Klan member. Yeah, true. that is unfortunate, but that's true. That's like where I grew up.
Cities. And mayors can actually regulate the living shit out of those emissions. For starters, people own the streets. Not cars, not auto manufacturers, people. So if some intrepid mayor were to say, shut off parts of the city to cars and make them pedestrian centers, well, that might just juice the economy while simultaneously eliminating a big chunk of emissions, now wouldn't it? But what am I saying? That would never work, except for when it already did work in Salt Lake City and Oakland and Tampa and Denver and New York and Nashville and Austin and Boston and Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
That is true. I went to high school in Salt Lake, Chet, and Salt Lake built this giant mall downtown and like got rid of like a giant road downtown Salt Lake City, and everybody just takes the train. They built a train, a bigger train, faster train. They had tracks, and then they built, I think it's called the Front Runner train. Isn't that what it's called, Heifer? What's the big ass train called? It's cheap as fuck to ride, by the way. Isn't it called Front Runner? I think is what it's called. Essentially, it's a fast, big-ass train that carries a shitload of people and goes downtown. And it helped very much reduce the traffic of downtown Salt Lake. Actually, I would say I've never been in a traffic jam in downtown Salt Lake City. Like, I've never had to, like, you know, wait multiple lights. Downtown Salt Lake City might be one of the best managed downtowns ever. Except for by the planetarium, I think is what it is. Yeah.
Austin and a ton of other.
But that's because there's not enough parking.
Other places. Also,
So people just
internationally,
parking.
the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, has been systematically shutting off parts of Paris to cars, and the notoriously
downtown
fickle
Denver's not
citizens of
horrible,
Paris.
but like every other city I've ever been to is terrible. Seattle, fucking dog shit. San Francisco, fucking dog shit. LA, yeah, don't even tell me about it, dude. So bad. Chicago, dog shit. All right. Detroit, dog shit. Milwaukee isn't horrible. I've been to Milwaukee. Or in Minneapolis, both of those don't have the same problem that Chicago has. But I don't know why. Why is it that Minneapolis, like Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Milwaukee, just don't have that?
Paris just reelected her with a big old thumbs
But Salt Lake and Denver aren't.
up, or if this means middle finger in French, whatever the thumbs up equivalent in France is. Mayors can also purchase EVs for their city vehicles, invest in better public transportation, establish higher clean energy targets, and a whole bunch of other options. Look, the three biggest cities in America are New York, LA, and Chicago. They're all infested with cars and trucks. None of them have amazing green energy mandates, and their public transportation is in dire need of repair. And none of these cities have had Republican mayors in the past 15 years. These are not problems that are caused by the Supreme Court, and they're actually capable of being addressed by people like you and me getting a little loud about it on a state and local level. And while we're on the subject, we've also got to add more housing to cities so we can take advantage of things like walking and public transportation, which mostly means doing away with the insane practice of single-family zoning, the subject of another Climate Town episode featuring all-time YouTube great Jason Slaughter, aka Not Just Bikes. You can watch it if you want to get to work on zoning and housing, which are two more incredibly effective local-level issues that don't require you to call
Kirsten Cinema.
There are a lot of ways to get involved. We got links in the description to local council groups, mayor's meetings, zoning. Check it out down there. I've also made friends with a group called Climate Change Makers. They are all about calling.
This video is really good. Really, really good. I think building cities around cars is one of the biggest mistakes of the century. Suburbanization, single family home shit, like you just said, is by far the worst. Because you'll be forced to do public transportation when everyone lives on top of each other, or like you don't have suburbanization. Suburbanization is the downfall of everything. It separates classes, it inhibits public transportation, it wastes so much, it's so incredibly wasteful. It separates communities from where you work and understanding. Suburbanization is just the nail in the coffin for American communities, or anywhere, Western communities, right? There's a reason, like, listen, China doesn't, like, bro, they build high rises before they'll build a fucking single family home.